Okay, we're definitely filming. I have double and triple checked that we're actually filming this time. We are filming. The filming is happening. We are filming this. Unlike last time. Just spent like an hour filming. And I wasn't filming. Pumpkins! Hail and well met, friends, and welcome to the best part of the year. That's right, it's pumpkin season, baby, and you know what that means? In this house, it's pumpkin muffin season, baby. By the way, I'm filming this while getting over an absolutely horrendous cold, so if I sound like a terrible goblin, I apologize. But I like goblins, personally, so I'm good with that. So this recipe actually originates in, of all places, my kindergarten class back in the 1980s. It's had a few tweaks and modifications, just gently over the years, but it very holds true to the spirit of the original recipe, and it remains to this day one of the things I absolutely must bake every year, and it's one of the most comforting things I've ever made. They go perfectly with tea or coffee, they travel beautifully, and they do stay fresh for quite a few days, though they never stick around that long in this house. I'd also like to note that this video is actually sponsored by my first book, Stopping for Coffee and Cake. It's a short, magical adventure in which two witches travel to their new home in the Enchanted Forest, interwoven with some of the most comforting baking recipes I have in my arsenal, perfect for a cozy autumn afternoon. You can find a link to this book in the description box below. For this recipe, you will need plain flour, baking powder, cinnamon, sugar, raisins, eggs, vegetable oil, and cooked pumpkin. You'll want to start with a large bowl and- oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. Immigrant perspective klaxon, please. Thank you. For my friends back in Canada and anywhere else that still uses cups for a lot of their baking recipes, do note that I'm using grams here and I am using a kitchen scale. I honestly don't know why we don't use this in Canada. You can get kitchen scales quite cheaply, and they don't take up a lot of footprint in your kitchen. And the measurements you get are more precise and more consistent. You can absolutely make this recipe in cups, it's what I grew up doing, and there are plenty of conversion tables available online to help you out. First things first, in goes the flour. You'll see that I'm not sifting it, because we don't need an especially light sponge here, but more importantly, I don't usually bother sifting my dry ingredients. I think that unless it's an ingredient that has a real tendency to kind of clump up, like cocoa often can, I haven't really noticed a huge difference, and I really don't think that for the most part you need to bother. Not to be controversial or anything, but if it's a step you can skip, I'm gonna skip it. Also, you can honestly pretty much use whatever flour you want here. This recipe calls for plain flour, and that's what I use most of the time, but I've also used spelt flour, I've used dark rye flour, which has a lovely flavor, and I've used an all-purpose gluten-free flour, and they all work beautifully. So, you do you. Next, in goes the baking powder. And you'll see at this point in the video, I was trying to gently not advertise directly for the supermarket, as they are very much not sponsoring me. You'll also notice I give up on this later on in the video, because who cares actually? Next in goes the cinnamon, and I do like to go fairly generous on the cinnamon here. It gives it a really lovely warmth without making it taste like a cinnamon muffin. You could absolutely also sub in other spices if you prefer, like cardamom would be lovely, nutmeg would be cool, maybe dial it back a little bit because nutmeg does tend to get quite strong. Or you could just cut out the spice entirely if spice isn't your bag. It's your pumpkin muffin. You do you, pumpkin pals. And now I'm just gonna rein in what looks like a flipping great buttload of sugar. Like, damn, that looks like a lot of sugar. I promise they're perfectly sweet without being cloying, though, trust me. It's raisin time! Now listen! I know raisins are a controversial ingredient, in as much as some people hate them and stuff, but if you're on the fence, I do really suggest you give them a try. They give a lovely textural counterpoint, they plump up nicely, and it's just a really nice addition to the muffin. But by all means, if you're not into raisins, don't add. You could absolutely use other dried fruits if you prefer. Apricots would be nice, dates are lovely, or even swap it out for like walnuts or something if you are in a house where you don't have a person who's allergic to nuts. You'll see that I'm actually stirring these directly into the dry ingredients. There is some received wisdom that suggests that doing this will help them distribute better in the final batter and in the final bake, but to be honest, I've also left them like right to the very end because I almost forgot to add them, and to be honest with you, I never notice a difference. Next, I'm gonna crack some eggs right on in there. Feel free to use flax eggs if you prefer. And then pour in the vegetable oil. You'll notice it's looking super thick right now, and that's where the pumpkin comes in. You'll note that this is actually fresh pumpkin. We buy a pumpkin every year, and they're actually, if you've never dismantled a pumpkin, they are actually pretty simple to break down. I just slice it open, you know, sort of crosswise with a good sharp knife. Scoop out the pumpkin guts. If you want to save the seeds, you can kind of rinse off all of the gunky stuff. Am I the only person who finds pumpkin guts to be a really comforting smell? Because I super do. Then I just take a bog standard vegetable peeler to take the skin off the outside of the pumpkin, because the skin is actually quite thin. So you can get away with extremely minimal food waste here, which I love for me. And then just chop the pumpkin into, you know, sort of like decent sized, like 1-inch dice, I suppose. Toss them into a nice big saucepan with a little splash of water on the bottom over a low heat. Cook that, stirring semi-frequently until the pumpkin is really nice and soft and yielding. You don't need to puree it, certainly not for this recipe. I actually like there to be a little bit of textural variation in my pumpkin muffins, so you get like a bit of like, oh, there's pumpkin in this, you know what I mean? The only thing that I do is if I find any sort of like egregious chunks that haven't quite like broken down into the mixture, you can just give them a light mash with a fork and you're good to go. Once the cooked pumpkin has cooled, and I'm really sorry that I didn't film any of this, but had I had the forethought when I was breaking down the pumpkin to know that I was going to make this video, I would have. Once the pumpkin is cooled, I like to portion it out into recipe-sized portions and then just put it straight in the freezer. That way, anytime that I want to make pumpkin muffins, I know I have the exact amount of pumpkin that I need to make 1 dozen. It's perfect. Now you can use tinned pumpkin if it's easier for you or if it's more accessible, but do note that if you are using tinned pumpkin, do make sure that what you get is labeled as 100% pumpkin and not pumpkin pie filling, which may have other ingredients and seasonings in it which we don't eat here. And do note also that tinned pumpkin may affect the texture slightly. If your batter's looking a little bit thick, feel free to just add a splash of water and you're good. Now we're ready to pop these into the oven. So I've got my 12-cup muffin tin prepared. I'm using these cute child's birthday party themed muffin cases, but you can also go without and just brush or spray the tin with a little extra oil. Next, portion the batter evenly between the muffin cups and bake in the center of a preheated oven until a knife inserted into one of the muffins comes out mostly clean. Once these are out of the oven, pop them straight onto a wire rack to cool. If you're not using the muffin cases, you may want to just give them a couple minutes to cool slightly and set up in the tins, and then take a knife and just run it gently around the sort of outer edge of each of the muffin cups, and they should slip right out. And while no one will judge you if you want to tuck straight into them, maybe do give them like an extra 5 minutes or so to cool down. Like, please don't burn yourself. I know they're good, but nothing's worth mouth burns. Trust me. I'm just gonna slice this open so you can see how tender and lovely these are on the inside. And okay, so I can eat some. They truly are the most comforting food though. Just look at how tender and moist they are and beautifully, just slightly pumpkin tinted. They are absolutely perfect for this time of year. And that, friends, is pumpkin muffins. If this is the kind of thing that you like to see, feel free to gently caress that like button. If you want to see more assorted shenanigans from me, feel free to gently caress the subscribe button. And regardless, I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a splendid day. Bye!